Downward dog is one of those ubiquitous poses that you see in almost every yoga class. And yet it's actually quite a complex pose for most bodies. It's challenging on the shoulders. It can make the shoulders feel a little bit achy. So we're going to go over some different ways to help support this pose just for your body. And I'm going to share some cues that you probably won't hear from a lot of your average teachers. So because we come from an anatomy informed approach here at Heart and Bones Yoga, and that's what we're going to get in this tutorial today. So if you're a yoga teacher or an everyday person just looking to feel better in your downward dog, this is going to be the tutorial for you. Like, subscribe, do all the usual things, and then let's get learning. Now, the best way to be an effective teacher or to understand a pose in your own body as a regular person is to understand what's happening underneath the surface in your body, in the joints, in any given pose. So being able to break down the pose goes a long way. Okay, so downward dog, my friends, one of the key issues that come up for a lot of people is that they actually don't have enough shoulder mobility in order to do the pose in a way that feels okay. Or they have too much shoulder mobility. They might have hypermobile shoulders, and then they end up sort of hanging out in the joints and not really building the requisite strength that they need for their shoulders. So it doesn't matter if you're super mobile or not mobile at all, we're going to learn some really key tips to make this a sustainable, functional, happier pose for you in your body. As a teacher, I do not teach or cue people to bring the heels to the ground when we do downward facing dog. That is not the goal, in my opinion, for down dog. There are other ways we can get a really nice hamstring stretch. I like to use downward facing dog as a teacher as an opportunity to improve the strength, the stability, and functionality of the shoulder joints rather than a hamstring stretch. So then that might mean that your downward dog doesn't look like it could go on the cover of the yoga journal anymore, if it ever did. But then that allows me, letting my legs sort of bend like that, allows me to work on a really nice stable base for my shoulders. Also, keeping in mind that we're not poking the ribs out, right? Remember that one where the ribs drop in? You let your ribs come in so that your spine stays long. And there we go. In this arm position that we have, it's actually asking us to have our arms fairly high over the head. For a lot of people, we don't have that mobility. We're not able to actually get our arms this high, let alone when we get our arms this high, then bearing weight through the hands and shoulders. That's a lot. So being able to improve your mobility goes a long way. So how to get good at downward facing dog actually can start long before you do downward facing dog. I've got a ton of shoulder mobility videos here in Heart and Bones online studio, heartandbones.com, heartandbonesyoga.com. If you join the online studio, we have a ton of yoga classes that go right into your shoulders and help get you that requisite mobility. But let's say you're not there yet and you're doing a yoga class and the teacher goes, let's go into downward dog, and you've watched this tutorial and you go, wait, my shoulder mobility isn't there yet. I got you. Work on your shoulder mobility throughout the day more often and then it will change. But in the moment of down dog, let's do a few things. So one of the things that we can really do is maybe move our hands a little bit wider. Sometimes downward facing dog is taught with the hands just a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. Sometimes it's a little bit nicer to just go a little wider. I'm not talking like really wide because that's going to be too hard and not sustainable, but maybe just a little wider. And sometimes you'll have to play around with this. So you can go there, hands a little bit wider, and then that gives a little bit more space for you to do the pose. Now here's the other thing. You want to play with getting your legs out of the equation, because if we have really tight hamstrings, it's going to be harder for the arms to find the reach. So when you bring your knees bent and you let your sit bones and your pelvis kind of reach up and back, keeping the knees bent, all of a sudden it gives us a little bit more length in the upper body, as opposed to trying to get your legs straight, heels to the ground, and then the whole body just does some sort of weird little plank down dog thing because we don't have the posterior chain ability, like maybe your hamstrings aren't tight or a little bit more tight and don't let you get that sense of lengthening. So get your legs out of the way. Use your legs, but just bend the knees. So if we don't have the mobility, those two versions were nice to get us there, but what if you're somebody who has all the mobility in the world? Maybe you've got hypermobile shoulders. Well, another thing that's going to make a big difference is how you use your hands. This is my go-to cue for so many things, which is pushing your hands into the floor, like you're pushing the floor away from us. And we're going to go from tabletop first to really get this action, and then move it into downward facing dog. Okay, here in tabletop, hands onto the floor, and then you're going to push the floor away from you. And then watch what happens in your shoulders and your arms. So stop pushing the floor away from you and let your shoulders just kind of hang out and sink. Now, again, push the floor away from you with your hands. And you'll notice all of a sudden your arms seem to get longer. You got a little bit more space between the shoulder blades. And what that's also doing is kicking on your stabilizer muscles around your glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint here. Because if you don't, and this is good if you don't have good flexibility either, but those who are more flexible in the shoulders, you really want this activation. Because now you are going to tuck the toes under and then make your way back into a downward facing dog. But do not stop pressing your hands into the floor the whole time, from tabletop into down dog. Keep pressing the floor away from you. And you might notice you can't go as far back as you were before. So should we do a before and after? Let's try this. Let's go into this. Don't worry about what you just learned. We're going to go into your normal down dog. And I'd like you to find your deepest, most like long, magical, good, picture perfect downward facing dog. Notice how it feels in your body, right? Let that chest be long, arms long. Okay, come back down. Cool. Now let's do our little action. Bring your hands, press them into the floor like you're pushing the floor away from you, maintaining that work. Keep pressing, and then don't lose the pressing. So as you transition back into downward facing dog, keep pressing the floor away from you. Keep pressing, and then you might go, wait a second, I'm not going as deep as I just did, and that's okay, because can you feel the work of your arms different than you did before? Is there more engagement? Is there more activity? Is it harder? And then come back out. So moving and learning, don't just watch this video, feel it in your own body. That work of pushing the floor away from you, what that's doing is on your humerus, pretend this is the head of your humerus, that's your upper arm bone. It's helping the head of your humerus to glide into its socket in a more effective, sustainable way, so that all those little stabilizer muscles are kicking on and holding it into place, because the first version, your more traditional, usual version before you learn this cue, is that activation wasn't quite there, and you were able to go deeper, to have that appearance of a deeper range of motion, because those little muscles weren't kicked on in the same way, and the head of your humerus got to not be as coherent in the joint. It sort of like slipped past and went into a deeper range of motion. So I hope that makes sense. Even if what I just said about the glenohumeral joint didn't completely make sense, that's okay, because what's the most important part is that it made sense in your body. Did you notice that work and activation and engagement? That is key for a functional, sustainable downward facing dog. And my not so mobile friends, that's still also going to help you as well. So that's a universal cue. If you were a yoga teacher watching this, pressing the hands into the floor, pushing the floor away from you is so key. So though we broke that down in a really different way, the cueing in your own body won't be as complex. All you got to think about when you go into downward facing dog is this. Why don't I walk us through it together, like we would in a real life class? What we just did was broke it down in a workshop style thing, but let's pretend we're in a real life class, and this is how I would cue it. So I always like to start from tabletop. So place your hands shoulder width apart. Maybe you want to have the hands a little bit wider. You can experiment and change at any time. And then start to feel like you're pushing the floor away from you with your hands. Keep that work, and then we're going to tuck one toe. We're going to tuck the other toe so that we're in a plank position just for a moment. Keep pushing the floor away from you and start to bend the knees as you send the hips back. Keep pressing the floor away from you with your hands, and only go as far as you can keep that action through your arms. So now we're going to notice, do we need to bend the knees a little bit more? Experiment with that. As you bend the knees, maybe you can send your sit bones back a little bit more, your hips. Notice if your downward dog became a little harder, but in a good way. And then you can come back down. So you can see how all we were really cueing was pushing the floor away from you, bending the knees, and voila. More stability and functional strength and mobility in the shoulders. That's what we want out of our downward facing dog. So if you liked that, leave a comment, let me know, and also let me know if there's other poses that you'd like to break down in a similar way so that we can adapt these poses using functional applied anatomy to make the poses functional and healthy and supportive for you and your body, and as a teacher for you and your students. So leave a comment, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.